All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Mad Money. So, portfolio value at the moment is around $370,000. It's about $70,000 from all-time highs. We're up about $39,000 from the all-time low. But really just wanted to give you guys a brief overview of the portfolio before we do a slightly deeper dive into M1 Finance and Robinhood. I know there's a sector, a small sector of YouTube that is strictly reserved for you guys that love M1 Finance and Robinhood. So I've had a Robinhood account for I don't even want to know how long. But I really have only started funding it rather recently, and M1 I've had since about 3Q of last year. You can see in terms of the grand scheme of things, the majority of my portfolio here is in the individual brokerage account with respect to income. About 63% comes from the individual brokerage account, and about 57% of the value is in the individual brokerage account. But when you look specifically at M1 Finance, about 3% of the entire portfolio is in M1 Finance, and about a little bit under 1% is coming from Robinhood. So, that being said, there is a little bit of income that comes from these parts of the portfolio as well. We have about 1.5% of the income of the portfolio coming from M1 Finance, and then about 0.7% of the income coming from the portfolio. So altogether, it's a little bit less than 5% of the portfolio in total. It provides probably a little bit less than 2.5% of the entire portfolio. So if you guys are interested and you're kind of hopping on here for, say, the Robinhood and M1 Finance portfolio, feel free to check out some of my other videos where I'm basically talking about the majority of the portfolio, maybe walking in to monthly dividend income or whatnot, what have you. Just to give you guys a brief overview, so had about $1,400 in dividends in March. About $750 or so is expected for what we're going to be getting in April timeframe. So altogether in the first quarter here, we had almost $3,000 worth of dividend payments and hope to continue that trend, get close to $3,400 or so in the second quarter here. Hopping over now to M1 Finance, so the portfolio is down overall since I've been adding more and more capital to the portfolio. Started off, I guess, to give you guys a brief rundown, about $5,500 back in September of last year, and have been steadily increasing, investing into mostly Johnson & Johnson 3M, and then Visa, which we'll kind of get to over the past 6-7 months or so, to the point where we've kind of got to this place where we hit this deep, I guess, discount of all these positions here. You can see the one that's getting hit the hardest at the moment is Visa. That's probably because I started buying it in November-ish time frame, when at that point it started getting into the $180 to $200 range. And so I was continuing to put capital into it at the $200 range, and is now since down to, it even got down to $130 or so. So I've been steadily buying, not only in my M1 Finance account, but in my individual brokerage account. I believe I bought 20 shares at $136 in my individual brokerage account. It was a great buy. I'm going to plan on holding those forever, but this is just one of those things where I kind of just want to have money taken out of the account where I'm not really thinking about it. It's just automatically being invested into high quality companies. And that being said, since we're kind of getting to the point where all these have kind of filled up, this is kind of a third into these three positions. I'm potentially looking to add a fourth position into the portfolio so I can continue to add $250 every 2 weeks, and really start to open up a rather new position. So you can see relatively easily adding about $250 every 2 weeks or so, generally speaking on the first trading day of the month and the middle trading day of the month. And we also have complemented some of these dividend payments starting to roll in here. I think by this point I've made close to $100 in total dividend payments throughout the entirety of my career with M1 Finance, which has been less than a year at this point, maybe just over 6 months at this point now. So yeah, if you guys are interested, I'll share my pie link down in the description. You guys can take a deeper look here, but the only ones that are really up at the moment is Johnson & Johnson. 3M is also down at the moment. That's just based off the fact that I was buying it in like the 150, 160 range, I think. So my average cost basis for it at the moment, does it have it here? 158. So that being said, it's kind of been dipping down with respect to the company kind of coming down in price over the past couple weeks here. So that being said, it's down to 133, which I think is a good price at the moment. If I have continued more investments here, I probably would. But you can see I'm down about 400 or so dollars in this position. Already made about $50 in dividends, which has obviously been invested in Visa because I started that position later than the rest. But let's take a quick look at Johnson & Johnson really quick. Let's see what the average cost basis is here. So the average cost basis for Johnson & Johnson is $128. We're currently sitting at about $134 as the price. So the most and the highest it's got up to is around $3,300 in terms of the position here, which is, how many shares is this at the moment? How many shares do I have? About 21 shares or so in Johnson & Johnson. So pretty cool. Already $40 or so in earned dividends, and I'm expecting to get a little bit more as time kind of progresses on here. But yeah, back up to $2,800. This hasn't been too bad of a drop here. Actually, we dropped a decent bit down once we got to 2,300 or so. That's a pretty steep dip, almost close to 30% there. So anyway, think Johnson & Johnson's also a decent buy. I think maybe 134 is a little bit expensive. I'd want to get it in 120-ish range personally, but it is what it is. Can't complain with it at all. And then Visa obviously is the one I'm down the most on, about 35% since I started investing in it. And you can just see I've continued to add the most money into this one over the past couple quarters, because originally I invested in Johnson & Johnson and 3M and had it kind of split 50-50 between those two. And then I added Visa, and that started at zero. So now this has kind of made its way up. So you can see, just because I've been continuing to add money to the position, the overall value of the position hasn't gone down, but I've accumulated more shares, which in my opinion is the most important part. So at this point now, with my other 20 shares that I have in my individual brokerage account, I have about 34 shares of Visa. The cost basis is vastly different between what I have in my M1 Finance, which is $182 a share, and my $130 or so a share in my individual brokerage account. So I'm going to probably continue to purchase this over time, but what I am looking for is to add another fourth stock, or maybe even a fifth stock. If you guys have any suggestions down below, let me know. I've been thinking heavily about getting a little bit more into technology stocks now that we have a little bit of a dip. I think Apple and Microsoft are still slightly overvalued at this point. Microsoft for sure is overvalued. Still has a PE of over 20 at this point. Apple is in the I think 15 price to earnings ratio at the $240 range for the stock. So it's not a great buy, but it's not a bargain buy either. Considering a lot of the other positions in the market are down 20, 30, sometimes even 30, 40 to 50%, depending on what sector you're looking at. And yeah, so I was thinking potentially looking at Facebook. I already have shares of Google, so I don't know if I'll continue or add a secondary one in here in M1 Finance specifically, but Facebook is definitely one I've been kind of keeping my eye on. And Amazon is one I also have been kind of keeping my eye on, but the price hasn't come down for Amazon that much, just based off the fact that they're truly being a supplier kind of powerhouse, and their logistics have just been kind of supporting the economy during this sort of time that we're seeing in the market right now. But yeah, if you guys have any suggestions, let me know. I really would like to add another one. But for now, I think everything's going relatively well. Still adding the $250 every 2 weeks or so, the beginning of the month and the middle of the month, and that's been going well. I think we're almost getting to the point where we're at even, so if this changes too much, it might start adding more into the 3M Visa range, just because Johnson & Johnson here is at 39% of the actual portion of the portfolio when it should be at about 33. So what would help is if you guys do give me an idea and I do invest in some of these stocks, then I might get a fourth stock, which would bring the the target down to about 25% each. So whatever that fourth stock is, I would kind of front end load that until it kind of gets even with the rest. But if you guys give me two really good stocks and I can't choose, then I might up it to 5 total stocks in the M1 Finance, and then we would have 20% in each. So it would kind of give a quick load on those last 2 positions. Looking specifically now at the Robinhood account here, Let's just actually take a quick look at the portfolio. So yes, portfolio is down from all-time highs for sure. I think by the time I was investing everything, it was close to about $1,800, and you can see it's really starting to get volatile over the past, I guess, month and a half now, to the point where at its worst it was down to about $1,200, and has kind of come up about $200 from that point. Some people are calling this kind of like a bull trap, so that people are kind of buying in and then getting their money, and then maybe more people buying in at the very tip here, and then it's starting to sell off again. But that's fine. I'm a buy and hold investor. I'm going to continue to invest on a bi-weekly or bi-monthly basis, or every twice or so every single month. So I'm throwing about $500 into this every single month as well. $250 in the beginning of the month, $250 in the middle of the month. You can see I've already started to accumulate 20 shares of about GM, 2 shares of KMI or Kinder Morgan, 9 shares of Royal Dutch Shell, which is down a pretty decent bit overall. And then you have Southern Company, which is down as well. So the activity as a whole has been relatively good. Let's just look at the history for a quick second here. And we can see that $250 is kind of going into the account and continue to buy stock and taking the dividends and using those dividends to continue to buy more and more stock. So I did get fortunately, I did get some free stock from you guys signing up. So if you guys haven't yet already and you'd like a free stock, make sure to do that in the description down below. But one of the things that I generally do is I'll sell that stock and use it to buy full positions and things that I actually want to buy. But yeah, you guys can see I've been rather consistent with my $250 additions into the portfolio, and can't complain with that at all. Cash is rather minimum at the portfolio. Generally don't try to have cash. I store my cash in a high yield savings account, because obviously Robinhood takes forever to do any real big moves with respect to high interest yield or high savings or high yields on cash or anything like that. So at this point, I'm not really expecting to get the high yield cash. I'll just keep my cash in a different account. If they're just going to withhold, it's so easy to move money these days. I don't need a company kind of withholding anything from me to try to get me to sign up or convince people to join or anything like that. I mean, the competition's so fierce now that unless you're a full brokerage, I mean, you're kind of obsolete at this point. So let's just take a quick look at some of these positions that I've kind of opened. So we have my GM position, which I've kind of continued to add to over the past couple months here. You can see it was kind of hovering around the $36 to $40 range, and it's really started to take a tumble to below $20 a share. So my average cost now is around $23. I'm going to continue to buy. I think in the next 4 or 5 years, this is really going to be a good competitor for Tesla. Think of cars that some people love. I personally am like a Tahoe kind of guy. I love Chevy Tahoes, Suburbans. My dad's a big Sierra or Silverado kind of guy. And so if they make those in, let's say, an EV vehicle, electronic vehicle, people have been buying those kind of cars for years and decades. So they'd probably lean towards having those. Historic brands that they've always owned a GM or they've always owned a Ford. And so I think that once these kind of the competition comes and kind of meets full circle with GM over the next couple years, it's really going to end up being more competition than people think. Yes, Tesla is kind of at the forefront. It's created its new company, and I'm not discounting that. It's a phenomenal company. It's been able to do a massive amounts of things and really blow the top off of the electronic vehicle market, which before was rather struggling and flopping, to be completely honest. But I think GM isn't out, and I think they have a pretty good balance sheet as well to help them through. Yeah, some people might be sitting here saying, well, they failed in 2008. It's a different company than it was in 2008, run by completely different people. And I think the balance sheet is rather good for GM in the future. Of course, some of my coworkers are big Tesla fans and are really hoping that I fail on my GM position. But it's a rather small position, 20 shares or whatever at $23. So $500 out of a $400,000, basically a $400,000 portfolio. It's rather small, so it won't really break the bank if that particular company goes out of order. Kinder Morgan's a really good pipeline company. Was hanging around the $19-20 range, and then it's rather gone downhill since we've kind of hit this volatility. Not too big of a position there. Bought a lot of Shell here back in like the past 3 months or so, and I have been buying Shell in my individual brokerage account where I've got some phenomenal deals. I think at the moment, with the current price, which is around $34 or something like that, I'm only down like 6% or something in that individual brokerage account. But in this, the average cost in these shares is like $52 a share, so it's not a very good position. Um, Rather small too, about $460, and it's down, about 30%, 34% from its highs, which is fine with me. I'm just going to use it to collect the dividends and buy some other stuff. I haven't really been focusing on Shell in my individual brokerage account at the moment. So if you guys are curious of what that looks like, make sure to give it a good check out. What I've mostly been focusing on over the past 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, if you call it that, as more capital comes into the Robinhood portfolio, looking to add more to Southern Company, and I'm also looking to add to that GM position that I kind of mentioned. Been really trying to lower my cost basis here in Southern Company. When the first week or so of turmoil was starting to hit the fan back in, I guess, late February timeframe, I was starting to add 2 shares or so every couple days to Southern Company, and it wasn't really getting hit. I would say the first couple of weeks, you could see, kind of got hit, in mid-February or so, and then it kind of came back up, and everyone was kind of rushing to utilities, which they thought would kind of be a safe haven, and really haven't had too much time to continue to buy Southern Company throughout. So I'm hoping that the price kind of stays deflated. I'd like to buy, some more shares of this. Of course, every time I get more money, and if I were to put all my money into Southern Company, I'd be able to pick up 4 or 5 shares, which will bring this cost basis down a little bit for sure. Maybe $1 or $2 every single time I'll be able to purchase more shares. But at the moment, I'm up to about 14 shares or so, hoping to get this to a decent position, maybe a couple hundred shares in the long term for sure. I really like Southern Company, so at the moment, it's the largest position that I have in the Robinhood portion of the portfolio, almost $826 of cost. But at the moment, of course, it's only worth about $704. So I think that this probably is going to be the one that I try to fill the most as capital comes in, and then as a secondary, keep my GM. I have Kinder Morgan and Royal Dutch Shell in another account, so I don't think I'll sell them, because I think at the end of the day I'm going to use those dividends to purchase some other stuff, and I do like the cash flow that comes from both of those organizations. And I'm obviously not going to sell at a loss either, because I think both of those are high quality companies. But it's amazing to see that only 4,100 people own Robinhood, or own Southern Company and Robinhood, which I think is something that should change. I think a lot of people should probably look at it, adding it to their portfolio. Curious what other people have in GM. So more people have GM, which I think is pretty surprising, than they have Southern Company. So just curious how many people have Shell. Only 14,000 people have Shell. That's interesting. I guarantee there's like less than 5,000 people that have Kinder Morgan. Oh, that's actually surprising. I thought more people would own Southern Company than they would own Kinder Morgan, but I guess maybe it's just because of the higher dividend or something like that. But anyway, would love to hear you guys' thoughts on the 6 or 7 positions that I have between M1 Finance and Robinhood, and if you guys have suggestions as to what additional stocks I should be adding to either the portfolio, the 1 to 2 stocks I might be adding into M1 Finance, would love your guys' thoughts on that, as well as if I'm missing out on any stocks in my overall portfolio. A lot of you guys have probably only tuned into these sorts of videos, so if you guys are interested in probably the other 40 stocks that I own, and the other, I guess you could say, 360 or so $1,000 in the rest of the portfolio across 40 other different positions, make sure to check out some of those other videos. There's plenty of videos for you guys to check out on the channel. If you guys haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Cheers.